The rain fell quietly against the window. Lena Carter lay on the cold hospital bed, her breathing shallow, her body weak. The room smelled of medicine and silence. No one stood beside her. No husband. No family. Just the sound of the rain, and regret. Her pale fingers trembled as she clutched the thin blanket. Memories flooded her mind, years of waiting, years of loving someone who never truly looked at her. Ethan Brooks. Her husband. The man she had loved with everything she had. And the man who had left her without hesitation. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. I shouldn't have begged, she whispered weakly. I shouldn't have stayed. Her voice faded. The monitor beside her let out a long, flat sound. Darkness swallowed everything. Beep. 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 The sound returned. But it was different. Sharp. Clear. Alive. Lena's eyes snapped open. She gasped, sitting up suddenly. Her heart pounded violently in her chest as she looked around. This wasn't a hospital. It was her bedroom. The familiar soft grey curtains. The neatly folded clothes. The faint scent of Ethan's cologne lingering in the air. Her breath caught. No, this can't be. She jumped out of bed, rushing toward the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was younger. Healthier. Alive. Her hands trembled as she touched her face. I'm back. Before she could process further, the bedroom door opened. Ethan Brooks walked in. Tall, composed, his expression cold and distant as always. But this time, Lena's heart didn't race with love. It tightened with something else. Recognition. Pain. And clarity. I need to talk to you, Ethan said, his tone flat. Those exact words. The same ones from that day. The day everything fell apart. Lena's fingers slowly curled into fists. She knew what was coming. In her past life, she had cried, begged, even knelt, just to make him stay. And he still left. This time. She stayed silent. Ethan frowned slightly at her calmness but continued, I don't think this marriage should continue. There it was. The sentence that once shattered her world. Lena looked at him quietly, her eyes steady. No tears. No panic. Just acceptance. Okay, she said softly. Ethan froze. What? I said okay, Lena repeated, her voice calm and clear. For the first time, Ethan's expression cracked. He had expected tears. Questions. Desperation. But not this. Lena turned away from him and walked toward the wardrobe. If you've already decided, she said as she opened the closet, then there's nothing to discuss. Ethan's brows furrowed. Lena, don't act like this. I'm trying to be reasonable. A faint smile appeared on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Reasonable, she echoed. She pulled out his suitcase and placed it on the bed. Then let's make it easier for both of us. Ethan stared at the suitcase, confusion slowly turning into irritation. What are you doing? Lena began folding his clothes neatly, one by one. I'm helping you pack. The room fell into a heavy silence. Ethan's chest tightened for reasons he couldn't explain. This isn't funny, he said coldly. I'm not joking, Lena replied calmly. Her movements were steady, almost practiced. Because in her past life, she had done this too. Except back then, her hands had been shaking from heartbreak. Now, they were steady with resolve. You should take the blue shirts, she continued. You wear them often. Ethan took a step forward. Lena, stop this. She didn't. Instead, she zipped up the suitcase halfway and finally looked at him. Isn't this what you wanted? Her gaze was clear, almost distant. Ethan suddenly felt like he couldn't read her at all. Something was off. You don't even want to ask who I'm leaving you for, he asked, testing her. Lena paused for a brief second. Of course she knew. Sophie Lane. The woman who had taken everything from her. In her past life, just hearing that name had broken her completely. But now. It doesn't matter, Lena said simply. Ethan's expression darkened. Lena, this isn't like you. Yes, she agreed quietly. It isn't. She closed the suitcase completely and pushed it toward him. You can go now. The words were gentle, but they hit harder than any scream. Ethan didn't move. For some reason, his chest felt uncomfortable, as if something important was slipping away. "Are you serious?" he asked. Lena nodded. Then, after a brief pause, she added softly, "Last time. I tried to make you stay." Ethan frowned. "What?" She shook her head lightly. "Nothing." A faint, almost invisible sadness passed through her eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly. "Take care of yourself," she said. It sounded like a farewell. A real one. Ethan suddenly felt a strange irritation rising in his chest. Why wasn't she stopping him? Why wasn't she fighting? Why did it feel like she was the one leaving him? He grabbed the suitcase abruptly. "Fine," he said coldly. "Don't regret this." Lena didn't respond. She simply stood there, watching him walk toward the door. Step by step. Just like before. But this time, she didn't chase after him. The door closed with a soft click. Silence filled the room again. Lena stood still for a long moment. Then slowly, she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her legs weakened, and she sat down on the edge of the bed. But no tears came. Only relief. "It's over," she whispered. For the first time in 2 lifetimes. Her heart felt light. That evening, Lena stood by the window, looking at the city lights. The same city that once felt like a cage. Now, it felt full of possibilities. Her phone buzzed. A message from her younger brother, Leo. "Sis, are you okay?" Lena smiled faintly and typed back, "I will be." She placed the phone down and looked out at the skyline. Her reflection in the glass looked different. Stronger. Calmer. Free. "This time," she said softly, "I choose myself." Morning light filtered softly into Lena's small apartment. It wasn't as spacious or elegant as the Brooks family home, but it was quiet, peaceful. And most importantly, it was hers. Lena stood barefoot by the window, holding a cup of warm tea. The city below bustled with life, but inside, everything felt still. For the first time in years, she had slept through the night. No waiting. No worrying. No silent tears in the dark. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the cup sink into her hands. "This is what freedom feels like," she murmured. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't comforting. It was Ethan. She stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "What is it?" she asked calmly. There was a pause on the other end, as if Ethan hadn't expected her to pick up so quickly. "We need to talk about the divorce," he said. Straight to the point. Just like him. Lena walked to the table and sat down, her tone steady. "There's nothing to discuss. I'll send the documents today." Another pause. "You're in a hurry," Ethan said, his voice carrying a hint of something unreadable. "Yes." "Why?" Lena almost laughed. "Why?" Because she had already wasted a lifetime. But instead, she simply replied, "Because you already made your choice." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Something about her words felt heavier than they should. "Fine," he said finally. "Do what you want." The call ended. Lena placed her phone down without hesitation. No lingering emotion. No second thoughts. Only clarity. Later that morning, Lena walked into a law office. The receptionist greeted her politely before leading her inside. That's when she saw him. Daniel Reed. He stood by the desk, flipping through a file. His posture was relaxed, his expression calm, yet there was a quiet sharpness in his eyes. He looked up as she entered. For a brief moment, something flickered across his gaze, recognition? Curiosity? "Miss Carter," he said, offering a polite nod. "Please, have a seat." Lena sat down across from him, her back straight. "I want to file for divorce," she said directly. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. No hesitation? None. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand something deeper. "Most clients in your situation take longer to decide." Lena's lips curved into a faint smile. "I already made the mistake of waiting once." Daniel didn't press further. Instead, he nodded and opened the file. "All right. Then let's make sure you walk away with what you deserve. Those words lingered. What you deserve. In her past life, Lena had walked away with nothing. Not even dignity. This time. That wouldn't happen. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan stood in a luxurious apartment, his expression dark. Sophie Lane wrapped her arms around him from behind, her voice soft and sweet. "Why are you still thinking about her?" she asked gently. "I'm not," Ethan replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Sophie smiled faintly, but her eyes were sharp. "Then why haven't you signed the divorce papers yet?" Ethan frowned slightly. Because they hadn't arrived yet. Because Lena was moving faster than expected. Because something felt wrong. "She agreed too easily," he said suddenly. Sophie's expression stiffened for just a second before she laughed lightly. "Isn't that a good thing?" Ethan didn't answer. "Good. Then why did it feel like he had lost control of something?" Back at the Brooks family home, Grace Brooks slammed her teacup onto the table. "She agreed to the divorce," she demanded sharply. Ethan stood across from her, his face unreadable. "Yes." Grace's brows furrowed deeply. "That woman," she muttered. "After everything, she just leaves like that." There was something unsettling about it. Grace had always believed Lena would cling to this marriage no matter what. She didn't even come back to talk. Grace pressed. "No." Silence fell. For the first time, Grace felt something she didn't expect. Discomfort. That afternoon, Lena stepped out of the law office. The paperwork was in motion. Everything was moving forward. No turning back. As she walked down the street, a familiar voice suddenly called out. "Lena." She turned. Leo Carter rushed toward her, slightly out of breath. Her younger brother looked at her anxiously. "I heard about it," he said. "That jerk actually dared to divorce you." Lena smiled faintly. "I divorced him too, you know." Leo blinked. "Wait, what?" "I agreed." Leo stared at her as if she had just said something unbelievable. "You didn't fight him?" "No." "You didn't cry?" "No." "Are you even my sister?" Lena laughed softly. "I am. Just a better version." Leo studied her carefully. And then, slowly, his expression softened. "Good," he said quietly. "You deserve better anyway." Those simple words warmed her heart more than anything else. Family. The one thing she had almost lost in her past life. As the sun began to set, Lena stood at a crosswalk. Cars passed by, people moved around her, but she stood still. Behind her was the past. Ahead of her, something unknown. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. "Don't make things difficult." Lena looked at it for a moment. Then calmly typed back. "I'm not. I'm making it easier." She hit send. And without waiting for a reply, she stepped forward as the light turned green. Walking away. Completely. Across the city, Ethan stared at his phone. Her message lingered on the screen. Short. Simple. Final. For some reason, his chest felt tight. As if something irreversible had just happened. "What are you doing, Lena?" he muttered. But there was no answer. Only silence. That night, Lena sat alone in her apartment. But unlike before, she didn't feel lonely. She opened her laptop, reviewing job opportunities, planning her next steps. Her life was no longer tied to anyone else. Every decision was hers. She paused for a moment, looking at her reflection on the dark screen. Her eyes were no longer filled with quiet sadness. They were steady, certain, alive. "This time," she whispered, "I walk away first." The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan Brooks stood in the living room, loosening his tie as he glanced around. The place was modern, stylish, exactly the kind of home Sophie had always wanted. But something about it felt unfamiliar. Cold. "Ethan, you're back?" Sophie Lane's voice came from the kitchen, sweet and bright. She walked out with a smile, placing a glass of water into his hand. "You look tired," she said gently, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeve. Ethan nodded faintly. "Work." Sophie tilted her head, studying him. You've been distracted lately. I said it's work. His tone was sharper than usual. Sophie's smile froze for a split second before returning. All right, she said softly. I just care about you. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he sat down on the couch, his gaze drifting unconsciously toward the empty space beside him. A strange thought crossed his mind. Lena used to sit there, quietly, sometimes reading, sometimes just waiting for him. She never interrupted, never complained. Back then, he had thought it was natural. Now, it felt like something was missing. Meanwhile, across the city, Lena stood in front of a mirror in a small office dressing room. She adjusted her blazer, her expression calm but focused. Today was her first day at her new job. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone living in the background. But as Lena Carter. Independent. Capable. Her phone buzzed. A message from Leo. First day. Don't let anyone bully you. Face with look of triumph. Lena smiled. I won't. She slipped her phone into her bag and walked out. Each step steady. Each breath lighter than before. Back at the Brooks family home, Grace Brooks sat stiffly in the living room, her expression displeased. Sophie stood across from her, hands folded politely. Aunt Grace, I made tea for you, Sophie said sweetly. Grace glanced at the cup but didn't touch it. You don't need to try so hard, she said coldly. Sophie's smile faltered. I just want to take care of you. Grace finally looked at her, her gaze sharp. Taking care of me is one thing. Replacing someone is another. The room fell silent. Sophie's fingers tightened slightly. I'm not trying to replace anyone, she said carefully. Grace let out a quiet scoff. You already did. Those words hit harder than expected. That evening, Ethan returned home later than usual. Sophie was waiting. But her expression was no longer as gentle. Why are you avoiding me? She asked directly. Ethan frowned. I'm not. You are, she insisted. Ever since the divorce started, you've been acting strange. Ethan loosened his tie again, irritation flickering in his eyes. What do you want me to do? Celebrate? I want you to act like you chose this, Sophie snapped. The room went still. Ethan looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, her expression wasn't soft or loving. It was demanding. Sharp. Unfamiliar. I did choose this, he said slowly. Then why does it feel like you regret it? Sophie asked. Ethan didn't answer. Because he didn't know. At the same time, Lena sat at her desk, reviewing documents. The office buzzed with quiet energy, but she remained focused. Still working? She looked up. Daniel Reed stood beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might need this, he said, placing one on her desk. Thank you, Lena replied. Daniel leaned slightly against the desk, observing her. You're adapting quickly. I have to, Lena said simply. No, Daniel corrected gently. You choose to. Lena paused. That was true. Everything now was her choice. Daniel smiled faintly. That's a good thing. For a moment, silence settled between them. But it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Later that night, Lena walked home alone. The city lights reflected softly in her eyes. For the first time, she noticed things she had once ignored. The sound of laughter from a nearby cafe. The warmth of streetlights. The feeling of being present. In her past life, her world had revolved around one person. Now, it was expanding. Across the city, Ethan stood on the balcony. The night air was cool, but it didn't ease the restlessness in his chest. Behind him, Sophie was talking on the phone, her voice slightly impatient. Yes, I told you already. No, he hasn't finalized it yet. Ethan's brows furrowed slightly. Hasn't finalized it yet? Why did that bother her so much? He looked down at his phone. Without thinking, he opened Lena's contact. Her name stared back at him. Simple. Unchanged. For a long moment, he hesitated. Then, he typed. Have you eaten? He stared at the message. It felt strange. Unnecessary. But before he could overthink it, He sent it. Lena's phone buzzed as she stepped into her apartment. She glanced at the screen. Ethan. For a brief second, her eyes flickered. In her past life, a message like this would have made her heart race with hope. Now, it only felt distant. She typed calmly, "Yes." Then she put her phone away. No extra words. No hidden emotions. Just a simple answer. Ethan stared at the reply. One word. That was it. No question back. No concern. Nothing. His grip on the phone tightened slightly. Why did it feel like there was an invisible wall between them now? Back in her apartment, Lena sat by the window. The city stretched endlessly before her. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped needing. And in its place, something new had grown. Strength, peace, freedom. She closed her eyes briefly, a quiet thought forming in her mind. Some loves feel like everything, until you realize they were never enough. On the balcony, Ethan looked out at the same city. But all he felt was emptiness. For the first time, a thought crossed his mind that he couldn't ignore. Was it really love? Morning sunlight spilled across Lena's desk. Stacks of documents, neatly organized. A laptop open. A half-finished cup of coffee beside her. Lena Carter sat upright, her expression focused as she typed steadily. Impressive. She paused and looked up. Daniel Reed stood by her desk again, arms crossed lightly, a faint smile on his face. You've only been here a few days, and you're already ahead of schedule. Lena saved her file before replying, I just don't like wasting time. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Or, you've already wasted enough. Lena didn't answer. But her silence was answer enough. Daniel didn't push further. Instead, he placed a file in front of her. A new project, he said. It's a bit challenging. Lena opened it, scanning quickly. Her eyes sharpened. I'll handle it. Daniel smiled faintly. I know you will. As he turned to leave, he paused. Lena, he added, his voice quieter, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Lena's fingers stilled slightly on the keyboard. But after a brief moment, she replied softly. I know. This time. She truly did. Across the city, tension filled the Brooks family home. Enough. Grace Brooks' voice cut sharply through the room. Sophie Lane stood frozen, her polite smile barely holding. I followed your instructions, Sophie said, trying to remain calm. I prepared everything. I didn't ask for perfection, Grace interrupted coldly. I asked for sincerity. Sophie's expression stiffened. What exactly do you mean? Grace set her teacup down slowly. It means, she said, her gaze piercing, you're trying too hard to look like someone you're not. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Sophie's fingers curled slightly at her sides. I only want to take care of this family, she said. Grace let out a quiet, almost dismissive laugh. This family, she repeated. You've only just stepped in, and you're already claiming it. The words were like a slap. For the first time, Sophie's composure cracked. That afternoon, Ethan sat in his office, staring at a report. But he wasn't reading it. His thoughts were elsewhere. Mr. Brooks. His assistant's voice snapped him back. Yes. There's a financial summary you should review. Ethan nodded absently. As the assistant placed the file on his desk, a detail caught his eye. A transaction record. Old. Dated back to a critical period in his company's early days. His brows furrowed. Where did this come from? The assistant hesitated. It's from archived records. It looks like a private transfer that helped stabilize the company during the crisis 3 years ago. Ethan's eyes narrowed. A private transfer? Yes. It wasn't listed under any major investor. Something about it felt off. Find out who made it, Ethan said. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Lena stepped out of a meeting room, exhaling quietly. You handled that well. She turned. Leo Carter leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed. What are you doing here? Lena asked, surprised. Leo grinned. I had business nearby. Thought I'd check on you. Lena smiled faintly. I'm fine. Leo studied her carefully, and then his expression darkened slightly. You really are, he said. Not pretending. Not forcing it. Actually fine. For a moment, he looked relieved. Then, his tone shifted. Did Ethan contact you again? Lena shook her head. Not recently. Leo scoffed. That guy. Lena glanced at him. What? Leo hesitated, as if deciding whether to say something. Finally, he spoke. Do you think he even knows? Knows what? Leo looked at her, his eyes serious. Everything you did for him. Lena's expression didn't change. He doesn't need to. Leo frowned. But he should, he insisted. He should know that when his company was about to collapse, it was your money that saved it. Silence. Lena looked away slightly. That was my choice. And what about his mother? Leo continued. All those times she blamed you, criticized you, did she know you were the one covering her medical bills? Lena's fingers tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. I didn't do it for recognition. Leo let out a frustrated sigh. You really, he muttered, shaking his head. You loved him too much. Lena didn't deny it. Because it was true. But that was in the past. That evening, Ethan sat in his office, the investigation report in his hands. His expression slowly changed as he read. Shock. Confusion. Disbelief. The transfer, he murmured, was from Lena. His grip tightened. That's not possible. But the records were clear. Every detail pointed to her. And then, another file. Medical payments. Regular. Consistent. Under Lena's name. 4. Grace Brooks. Ethan's breath caught. Why didn't she tell me? No one answered. Only silence filled the room. At the same time, Lena walked out of her office building. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and gold. Lena. She turned. Daniel stood a few steps away. Finished for the day? He asked. She nodded. Walk with me, he offered. Lena hesitated briefly, then agreed. They walked side by side, the city glowing around them. You've changed, Daniel said after a moment. Lena glanced at him. Is that a bad thing? No, he replied softly. It's a rare thing. Lena looked ahead. Her expression calm. I just stopped holding on to things that were never mine. Daniel's gaze lingered on her for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. Good. Across the city, Ethan stood outside Lena's apartment building. The report still clutched in his hand. His mind was a mess. All this time, everything she did, everything she gave. And he never noticed. Never asked. Never cared enough to see. He looked up at the building. Lights glowed in some windows. One of them was hers. For the first time, Ethan felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Not anger. Not pride. But something deeper. Regret. Lena, he whispered. At that exact moment, Lena stood by her window, looking out at the same city. Unaware that someone stood below. Unaware that the truth had finally surfaced. Her reflection in the glass was steady. Peaceful. Unshaken. Because this time, her happiness didn't depend on anyone else. Outside, Ethan took a step forward. Then stopped. For some reason. He suddenly didn't know if he had the right to go up. The night air was heavy. Ethan Brooks stood outside Lena's apartment building, his gaze fixed on the lit window above. The report in his hand felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Every page. Every number. Every truth he had ignored. Why didn't you tell me? He murmured under his breath. But deep down, he already knew the answer. Because he had never asked. Upstairs, Lena Carter stood by her window, unaware of the man below. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Did you get home safely? Lena typed back. Yes. Thank you for today. She paused for a moment, then added. And, thank you for treating me like I matter. There was a brief silence. Then Daniel replied. You always did. Lena stared at the message for a second longer than necessary. A soft emotion flickered in her eyes. Warm. Gentle. Real. Not overwhelming like before. Not painful. Just steady. Downstairs, Ethan finally moved. Step by step, he walked into the building. His heart beat faster with each floor he passed. By the time he stood in front of Lena's door, his hand hesitated mid-air. For the first time in his life, Ethan Brooks felt unsure. But before he could change his mind, he knocked. Inside, Lena frowned slightly. At this hour, she walked to the door and opened it. And froze. Ethan stood there, tired, uneasy, different. For a brief second, silence stretched between them. Then Lena's expression returned to calm. "What do you want?" she asked. No warmth. No anger. Just distance. Ethan swallowed slightly. "I need to talk to you." Lena looked at him for a moment. Then stepped aside. 5 minutes. They sat across from each other. The same two people. But everything between them had changed. Ethan placed the report on the table. "I saw this," he said. Lena glanced at it briefly. Her expression didn't shift. "So?" Ethan's fingers tightened. "So," he repeated, disbelief creeping into his voice. "You gave money to my company when it was about to collapse. You paid for my mother's medical bills. And you never said anything." Lena leaned back slightly. "I didn't think it was necessary." "Not necessary?" Ethan's voice rose. "Lena, that wasn't a small thing. It wasn't meant to be," she replied calmly. Ethan stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Why?" he asked quietly. Lena met his gaze. "Because I was your wife." Simple. Direct. No hesitation. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. "And now?" he asked. Lena's expression softened. But only slightly. "Now I'm not." Silence fell. Heavy. Final. Ethan looked down, his voice lower now. "Did you ever regret it?" Lena thought for a moment. Then answered honestly. "No." Ethan's eyes flickered. "But I regret something else." He looked up quickly. "What?" Lena's gaze was steady. "I regret loving someone who never tried to understand me." The words were quiet. But they hit harder than anything else. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice almost desperate. "Lena, things don't have to end like this." Lena didn't react. "You're just realizing everything now," she said. "But I already lived through it." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Lena shook her head slightly. "Nothing." Because how could she explain a lifetime of pain in a few words? At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. "Sophie." He hesitated. Then declined the call. Lena noticed. But she said nothing. Across the city, Sophie Lane stared at her phone, her expression darkening. "He declined," she whispered. Her grip tightened. Something was slipping. And she could feel it. Back in the apartment, Ethan looked at Lena again. "Come back," he said suddenly. The words hung in the air. Lena blinked once. As if she hadn't heard correctly. "What?" "Come back to me," Ethan repeated, his voice firm now. "We can fix this." For a brief second, time seemed to freeze. Then, Lena smiled. Softly. But there was no warmth in it. "Ethan," she said gently. "You don't want me back." His brows furrowed. "I do." "No," she shook her head. "You just don't like losing." Silence. Ethan's expression froze. Because deep down, he couldn't deny it completely. Lena stood up, walking toward the window. Her voice calm. "You had me once," she said. "Completely." Ethan's chest tightened. "And you chose someone else." Her reflection in the glass looked distant. Untouchable. "I didn't choose wrong," Ethan insisted. Lena turned slightly, looking at him. Not with love. Not with hate. Just clarity. "Then why are you here?" He couldn't answer. At that exact moment, a sudden knock came at the door. Both of them froze. Lena frowned slightly and walked over. She opened it. Sophie stood there. Her usual elegance was gone, replaced by urgency and anger. "So this is where you are," Sophie said, her eyes locking onto Ethan. The atmosphere instantly shifted. Tense. Sharp. Explosive. Sophie stepped inside without waiting. "I've been calling you," she said, her tone tight. "And you're here." Ethan stood up, frowning. "Sophie, this isn't what?" She cut him off. "You came to see your ex-wife in the middle of the night?" Her gaze snapped to Lena. Cold. Hostile. "You really don't know when to let go, do you?" The accusation hung in the air. But Lena didn't react. Instead, she said calmly, "You should ask him that." Sophie's expression darkened further. Ethan rubbed his temples slightly. "This isn't the time." "Then when is it?" Sophie demanded. Her voice rose. Her composure cracking completely. "I stayed by your side. I waited for you. And now you're hesitating because of her." Ethan's silence was answer enough. Lena watched quietly, and in that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't love. It never was. Just choices. And consequences. She walked to the door and opened it. "Both of you should leave," she said calmly. Sophie scoffed. "You think you can?" "I'm tired," Lena interrupted gently. "And this doesn't concern me anymore." Those words landed heavily. Because they were true. Ethan looked at her. "Lena." She didn't let him finish. "Good night." And then, she closed the door. Firmly. Outside, silence fell between Ethan and Sophie. But it wasn't peaceful. It was breaking. Inside, Lena leaned against the door for a moment. Her eyes closed briefly. Her heart was steady. No pain. No hesitation. Only certainty. "I did love you," she whispered softly. Then opened her eyes. Calm. Clear. "But I love myself more now." The rain returned. Soft at first, then steady, washing over the city like a quiet ending. Inside her apartment, Lena Carter stood by the window, watching droplets trace slow paths down the glass. Last night had closed something. Not just a chapter. An entire lifetime. Her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer's office. "Final divorce papers are ready for signature." Lena stared at the message for a moment. No hesitation. No lingering emotion. Just a quiet breath. "I'll be there this morning." She typed it calmly and set her phone down. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But inside, everything felt clear. At the law office, the atmosphere was calm and professional. Daniel Reed sat across from Lena, the final documents neatly arranged between them. "This is it," he said gently. "Once you sign, everything is legally over." Lena nodded. She picked up the pen. For a brief second, her hand paused above the paper. Not because she was unsure, but because she remembered. A past life filled with waiting. With hoping. With loving someone who never chose her back. Then, she signed. Clean. Steady. Final. Daniel watched her quietly. "No regrets?" he asked. Lena placed the pen down. "None." And this time, it was the truth. Across the city, the Brooks family home was anything but calm. Unbelievable. Grace Brooks slammed the newspaper onto the table. Headlines spread across the page. Brooks family scandal, internal conflict and rumored affair. Sophie Lane stood nearby, her face pale. This is exaggerated," she said quickly. Grace's sharp gaze turned toward her. "Is it?" The tension in the room was suffocating. 4 years, the Brooks family had maintained a perfect public image. Now, cracks were showing. And Sophie was at the center of it. Ethan stood by the window, his expression dark. "Who leaked this?" he asked coldly. No one answered. Because deep down, they all knew. Secrets never stayed buried forever. Sophie stepped closer, her voice urgent. "Ethan, you have to fix this," she said. "You can't let your reputation fall like this." Ethan turned slowly, his eyes colder than she had ever seen them. "My reputation," he repeated. Sophie hesitated. Our reputation, she corrected quickly. But it was too late. Something in Ethan's expression shifted. For the first time, he saw her clearly. Not as the woman he chose, but as someone who needed him. For what he had. Not who he was. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A message. From Lena. No. From her lawyer. The divorce has been finalized. Ethan froze. His grip tightened around the phone. Finalized. Just like that. No turning back. No second chance. Nothing left. Meanwhile, Lena stepped out of the law office. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. She looked up. Soft sunlight broke through the clouds. For a moment, she simply stood there. Breathing. Feeling. Existing. Without weight. It's really over, she whispered. And instead of sadness, she felt relief. Lena. She turned. Daniel stood a few steps behind her. No files. No formal tone. Just him. It's done, she said. He nodded. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Comfortable. Easy. Different from anything she had known before. I'm glad, Daniel said softly. Lena looked at him. Why? Because you didn't lose anything, he replied. You just stopped holding on to something that was never yours. Those words settled deep in her chest. Not painful. Not heavy. Just right. Daniel hesitated for a brief moment. Then spoke again. Lena, But he stopped. As if reconsidering. Lena tilted her head slightly. What is it? Daniel smiled faintly. Nothing urgent. Because this wasn't the right moment. And unlike someone else, he knew how to wait. Across the city, everything was falling apart. Sophie paced anxiously in the apartment. Why aren't you saying anything? She demanded. Ethan sat silently, his phone still in his hand. The message still on the screen. It's over, he said finally. Sophie froze. What do you mean? The divorce, Ethan replied. It's finalized. Silence. Then. That's good, Sophie said quickly. That's what we wanted. Ethan looked up at her. His expression unreadable. Is it? Sophie frowned. What kind of question is that? Ethan stood slowly. For the first time. He didn't feel certain. Didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel anything he expected. Only. Empty. Ethan, Sophie said, stepping closer, we can move forward now. No more obstacles. Obstacle. That's what she called Lena. Something twisted painfully in his chest. He suddenly remembered. A quiet figure sitting beside him. A warm meal waiting late at night. A soft voice asking if he was tired. Someone who never demanded. Never pushed. Only gave. And he had walked away from it. Willingly. I need some time, Ethan said abruptly. Sophie's expression changed instantly. Time, she repeated. For what? But Ethan didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't even understand himself. Meanwhile, Lena stood on a quiet street. The rain-washed pavement reflected the soft glow of the evening lights. She took a deep breath. Then exhaled slowly. Her shoulders felt lighter. Her heart. Steady. Free. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not to escape. But to feel. To acknowledge everything she had been through. Everything she had survived. Everything she had let go. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation left. No doubt. No past holding her back. This time, she said softly, I choose my life. 1 year later. The city looked the same. But everything had changed. Morning sunlight poured into a spacious, modern office. Lena Carter stood by the window, reviewing a document in her hands. Her reflection in the glass was calm, confident, someone who no longer carried the weight of the past. Ms. Carter, the meeting is ready. She turned slightly and nodded. I'll be there in a minute. As the assistant left, Lena placed the file down and glanced at her schedule. Meetings. Contracts. New projects. Her life was full. Not because someone else filled it. but because she built it herself. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan Brooks sat alone in his office. The once busy space now felt quiet. Too quiet. The company was still standing, but barely. The scandal from a year ago had cost him more than money, reputation, trust, and most of all, her. Sophie Lane was long gone. The moment things started collapsing, she had walked away without hesitation. Just like he once did. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. I guess this is what it feels like. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Memories surfaced uninvited. A quiet home. Warm meals. A woman who never asked for anything, except for him to stay. And he didn't. His phone buzzed. A reminder. Carter Group Partnership Meeting, 10 a.m. Ethan's eyes paused on the name. Carter. A slow realization settled in. Lena. At the same time, the conference room doors opened. Executives stood as Lena entered. She walked in with quiet authority, her posture straight, her expression composed. No hesitation. No doubt. Let's begin, she said calmly. Her voice was steady, clear, unshaken. Minutes later, another door opened. Ethan stepped in and froze. There she was. Lena Carter, standing at the head of the table. Confident, poised, untouchable. For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. Lena looked up. Their eyes met. But unlike before, there was no emotion in hers. No love. No pain. Just recognition. Professional. Distant. Mr. Brooks, she said politely. Ethan's chest tightened. Ms. Carter, he replied. Formal. Strangers. That's what they were now. The meeting continued. Numbers. Plans. Negotiations. Lena spoke clearly, efficiently. Every word precise. Every decision firm. Ethan listened. But not to the business. To her. The way she carried herself. The way she spoke. The way she no longer needed him. After the meeting ended, people began to leave. But Ethan stayed. Lena. She paused. Then turned. Yes. Her tone was calm. Neutral. Like speaking to any other business partner. Ethan hesitated. For the first time. He didn't know how to start. Can we talk? He asked. Lena considered it for a moment. Then nodded. 5 minutes. They stood by the window. The same city stretched out before them. But everything between them was different now. Ethan exhaled slowly. I didn't think I'd see you like this. Lena tilted her head slightly. Like what? Strong, he admitted. Happy. Lena's lips curved into a faint smile. I always could be. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew what she meant. He just never gave her the chance. Silence settled between them. Then. I was wrong, Ethan said quietly. Lena didn't react. I thought I understood what I wanted, he continued. But I didn't. He looked at her. Really looked. I lost you because of that. Lena listened. Calm. Still. Unaffected. After a moment, she spoke. Yes. No anger. No blame. Just truth. Ethan let out a soft, bitter breath. Do you ever think about the past? Lena looked out at the city. Then answered honestly. No. That single word said everything. Ethan swallowed. Then, gathering what little courage he had left. Can we try again? He asked. The question hung in the air. Fragile. Desperate. Too late. Lena turned to him. Her expression gentle. But firm. No. Not harsh. Not cold. Just final. Ethan's hands clenched slightly. Why? He needed to hear it. Even if it broke him. Lena met his gaze. Because I already gave you everything once, she said softly. Her voice wasn't trembling. It was steady. I won't give myself to someone who only realizes my worth after losing me. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. But he didn't interrupt. Lena continued. I don't hate you. That surprised him. I just don't need you anymore. Silence. Heavy. Final. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, a quiet realization settling deep within him. This was the end. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just over. I understand, he said finally. And for the first time. He truly did. Lena nodded slightly, then turned to leave. But before she walked away, she paused. Without looking back, she said, "Take care of yourself." Simple. Polite. Distant. And then she left. Ethan stood alone, watching her disappear, just like she once watched him. Except this time, there was no one left to follow. Outside, the sun shone brightly. The air felt light. Free. Lena stepped out of the building and stopped. Daniel Reed stood nearby, as if he had been waiting, but not impatiently, not urgently, just there. "Finished?" he asked. Lena smiled faintly. "Yes." Daniel studied her for a moment, then smiled back. "Good." They stood side by side. Not too close. Not too far. Comfortable. Natural. "Where to next?" he asked. Lena looked ahead. The road stretched forward. Wide. Open. Full of possibilities. She took a small step forward. Then another. Her voice soft. But certain. "Anywhere I choose." Daniel followed beside her. Not leading. Not pulling. Just walking with her. Behind them. The past faded quietly. No longer something to return to. Only something to remember. And ahead. A future she finally owned.